It's hard to talk about Silent Hill, the game, as an isolated incident when you're deeply invested in Silent Hill, the series. A bit of what I call the Konami Franchise Tax, which has a bit too much baggage to unpack in a video like this. Silent Hill 1 wasn't my first survival horror game, nor is it my favorite, but it was the game that made me get it. By stripping back some of the complexities of the genre to put all of its eggs in the otherworldly psychological horror basket, it's no surprise that this game popped off out of nowhere. I find it fascinating and wanted to look at it as a unique title stuck in a unique period of time. Inspired in part by the games that developed survival horror into its own genre, which then inspired countless games that followed in the next 25 years, Silent Hill is a technical and artistic achievement of a video game. Especially impressive considering Team Silent were underdogs of Konami, but you don't need another Silent Hill history lesson. Nothing is to be gained by saying, "Did you know that while releasing in 1999, Silent Hill 1's development actually started in 1970, with the birth of Keiichiro Toyama?" We've all heard it a billion times. As always, this is not an all-encompassing review, because we are chilling. Humbert Mason is driving his adopted daughter Cheryl to the town of Silent Hill for a vacation. Narrowly avoiding hitting a girl on the road, he wakes up alone in the titular town. As he sets off to make sense of where Cheryl could have gone, the game wastes no time getting you in the right headspace to prepare you for what's to come. As Humbert follows what appears to be his daughter down a snowy, fog-filled street, you can immediately tell something's off. The snow seems sudden and out of place given the previous CG intro scene. Not only that, but the town is completely abandoned. Eventually, you find yourself down a dark alleyway, the tension slowly rising as the world around you shifts. The alley changes, twisting and distorting more and more with every new camera angle. As you try to escape, Humbert finds his way blocked off, monsters swarming you until he wakes up in a panic, safely in a little local diner. Team Silent seemed to love the idea of toying with their players, and this game is sprinkled with so many neat little examples of that. We get to play a fun little game when talking about Silent Hill. Was this ahead of its time, or did this define the times? Who can say? That's a rhetorical question, by the way, I don't really care. We're talking about a fully 3D, open-world-ish horror adventure game taking place in an explorable town with combat and puzzles. All of this with a dynamic camera, which can both be controlled and will shift position based on his location in the 3D space. I'm not really looking to make the claim that Team Silent made the first ever psychological horror game. It's more like no one in the 3D console gaming space had access to these amount of resources to do horror games like this. Arthouse-inspired survival horror funded by big Konami bucks is just the most unsafe idea on paper ever, and it totally worked out. Knowing when to pull the control away from the player, or even when to change their perspective to make them feel watched or uncomfortable, is proof that these dudes were masters of their craft. The crazy camera shifts down the alley are a great sampler of what you can expect, in the same way that following Humbert's head as you walk into the last dungeon is its victory lap. This is one of those games where, regardless of intent, every part of it feels cohesive. Even the concessions the game needs to make in order to function at all are built into the narrative in such an effective way that the fog has become the most iconic thing about the entire franchise. Despite that very fog confusing and obscuring your sense of direction, the town of Silent Hill is deceptively linear. This is, of course, a great thing. As long as you're thorough in exploring and open your map regularly, you'll always be pushed in the right direction. The streets are pretty open as well, letting you go off into specific buildings or alleys at your leisure. There are shops, houses, and even a motel you'll walk through. This is also where you can start to see how much this team really likes designing 3D interiors. The amount of detail you'll find in just all of them is crazy impressive considering the limitations that they were working with. Who out here fucking with big cola agenda? Some dude was really out here getting ready for the biggest slurp session of his life before Alessa projected a mega nightmare all over this humble little Chungus Pepsi town. I'm currently in my retro tink era, if you haven't caught on yet, but I'll say once again, my philosophy on recommending how people play older games is to do so however they want or can. I'm playing this on original hardware, upscaling the raw PS1 output to 1440p. But feel free to peep it on DuckStation or download it on your Vita if you're extra cool. That's how I first played the game. I don't really care how you get your hands on it, but I recommend playing it in the original resolution at least for the first playthrough. This game just looks mind-blowingly good with pixels. Dithering is akin to a long-lost spice in this modern era of wannabe 4K gaming, and I miss it every day. It adds so much extra detail to the frame, as if it's trying to mimic film grain, which is something the following games actually apply to the image as a filter. There's something so special about the pixelated horror games of this era, with your brain working overtime to convert whatever's on screen into something you can understand.
Was that another dream? Did I pass out again?
I think I have COVID.
Do I have COVID?
As soon as the graphical leap of the next generation of consoles comes into play, I do think something is kind of lost in this regard, with better hardware obviously meaning a higher visual fidelity, meaning developers can convey what they're actually trying to get across with ease. The only side effect being that more often than not, less is left up to the imagination. This doesn't make either style better or worse, it just gives PS1 horror a bit of a lightning in a bottle vibe. This spell is lifted upon up-resing the game too much, I feel. You do not need mewing Humbert. He is scary for incorrect reasons. Despite being so eager and willing to jump into the realm of full 3D, Silent Hill is not scared of the pre-render, and better off for it.
Officer Gookie down.
Do you need another guy to tell you that pre-renders in horror games are better than honey in fucktoast? No, but I'm gonna do it anyway. There's something almost cozy about the backgrounds of a classic RE game when you're as sexually attracted to old game pre-renders as I am. So when they show up in a mostly 3D game like a celebrity cameo, it makes me immediately sit up in my chair. Like, oh fuck, I recognize that dude. His renders are so detailed, and I'm gonna The pre-rendered cutscenes were all made by a single guy who crunched to hell and back, thanks Konami, but I can't deny they are a pretty crucial aspect to how uncanny this game gets at times. Definitely shouldn't have made that guy sleep under his desk though. As you roam the streets of Silent Hill, you'll quickly pick up that graphically, this game is nothing to sneeze at, with brilliant texture work and pretty memorable locations throughout. Not my favorite iteration of the town, but it's a wonderful first attempt and great in its own right. As the original series went on, the focus shifted from small towns to urban cities. However, the games continue to play on many of the fears you'd have wandering around any town or city by yourself. Places that should be populated, teeming with life, but now lay desolated. It feels wrong in all the right ways. Not to get ahead of myself. Way ahead of myself, by the way. Please expect nothing from me. But I think a massive reason for my adoration of the Silent Hill 2 remake is all the added town time. I love the idea of scrounging around the abandoned remnants of a small society where I don't belong. This is Silent Hill to me. And nothing hits like Silent Hill for all of us ghost town enjoyers out there. We don't get a lot of winter-based horror games. It feels like a bit of a dying breed in general, doesn't it? I've always considered a snow day something to look forward to, but there's no denying there's definitely a window of time where things get a little creepy, right? Ice on the streets keeps cars from driving, so people are more likely stuck inside. The snow continues to pelt the town, but then there's you, who decided to go for a walk. I associate snow with loneliness, both the good and bad kinds. These photos are from a wistful morning at National Harbor when MagFest 2024 got hit with a pretty big snowstorm. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the streets felt empty. It was a really weird vibe. I loved it. I can only imagine how strange it must feel to be out in a small town or even in the woods during a snowy weekend. How peace might quickly turn into tense creepiness. Silent Hill 1 and, by association, Shattered Memories are the only Silent Hill games which try to lean into that frigid horror, and they're better for it. And yes, I include the play novel in that as well. I just wanted to see if you were about to start typing a comment. Even if the snow doesn't even or can't even stick to the ground in SH1, it does a lot of heavy lifting for creating a much colder atmosphere than if they just had never bothered. Can I gush about the map? This map system right here, the Silent Hill map system, this is single-handedly responsible for making me love survival horror games, even if not all of them do it as good as Silent Hill. I stayed away from this series for years because of the town exploration system, but what fans don't always tell you is that Team Silent fully considered this. Humbert will take notes on his map as you explore, crossing off dead ends or circling spots where you might need to come back to with a key item to progress. So while it might seem like you're dropped in this town with no direction, you'll gain said direction by going off to explore and narrowing down what paths are available. Every path has either an item, a note on where you could be going, or a road that's been blocked off or destroyed. Your map will then be updated and you're back on your merry way. The same concept is applied to the game's dungeons, which is funny because describing it in this way has me thinking of Silent Hill as an elaborate action DRPG, which it super is, by the way. In an effort to try to be as understanding as I could possibly be, I must accept that there is someone out there who doesn't think that this is peak video gaming. I feel bad that the satisfaction of opening a billion locked doors until you find the unlocked one doesn't hit your brain good. Genuinely. Silent Hill progression is truly for the connoisseurs, the big brains, the ADHD heroes. Humbert's nature as a writer is also explored in the gameplay itself. The way the game contextualizes saving your game as him jotting down notes across town. Someday, someone may experience these bizarre events. Hopefully, they'll find my notes useful. That's sick. Says a lot about the kind of guy he is. If this was a vibe video like the SH4 one, I'd probably be like,
What's that?
Humbert saying,
Huh. Radio.
highlights a curious mind yearning for knowledge, causing him to crave new experiences at the cost of his own safety.
Radio.
Which it is not. So, I'll just settle for the fact that I think it's pretty cool that they made the protagonist a writer to explain his active mind, assuming that one day others will end up wandering into the same situation as he has. There is no better praise to offer the Team Silent era of the series than saying that these games always have me RP walking when I'm not in immediate danger. If I'm doing this in your game, it means you have passed the biggest vibe check, and I fuck with your horror game. Admittedly, on the second pass, I'd struggle to say this game is necessarily as scary as the revisits of some of the other games still get me, but make no mistake, I am still always unnerved. The horror here thrives on playing with the idea of the unknown, like the town could conjure up just about anything at you. We're talking about a setting where, at a whim, the entire town can shift into a nightmare version of itself. The town, and by extension, the game of Silent Hill, feels like a sentient being. There's a pretty famous moment in the hospital where you start by checking out each floor available to you. After the school level, you might think you have an idea on how the formula will play out for the rest of the game. You check out every single room you can, collect all the puzzle items, solve whatever you can find, and then once it's cleared out, you have to play through the otherworld version of it, which is more hostile and completely moves everything around. It establishes that, hey, this game will mess with your preconceived notions on even what it is. So you enter the hospital, confident you know how this is going to play out, but the halls are eerily empty. The whole building is abandoned, more so than any previous place you've been to. The only way forward is an elevator, and each of the 3 floors lead to a dead end. Confused, dejected, or a secret third thing,
The adventure gamer flow state?
you hop back into the elevator and see a new button with a 4th floor now accessible. When I first played this game, this got me like nothing else. Clicking it shifts you immediately to the otherworld version of the hospital, where the dungeon really starts. In my eyes, there's no scene that better sets the groundwork for the style of horror that Team Silent loves than that one. And moments like this are all over the game. They want to fuck with you, and will do whatever tricks they think seem the most fun to do it. 2 great ones that come to mind are the locker scene in the school and the fridge at the end, which are delightful little spooky moments, with the second one actually being something I completely missed on my first go. Certified Silent Hill moments in my book. I view horror like a roller coaster and always grin and giggle whenever I catch the game giving me a good scare, like they got one over on me. Apparently, this is a weird reaction to some, but I know what I'm about. I'm adorable. It just so happens to be that the way I engage with horror and the way the town loves projecting nightmares makes it almost feel as if the town is always trying to gauge my reaction. It's this unpredictability that makes the first playthrough of any great Silent Hill game so memorable. My first experience was crazy, but that was many years ago, so all I can do is present a dramatic recreation of what went down on my first playthrough. Enjoy. Fuck, 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 fuck! Who gave these kids knives? Oh my god, why am I in Boston? Ew! Fucking pterodactyls! Like I said, the atmosphere does a lot of heavy lifting in Silent Hill. Survival horror games before this would often try to push you to your limits mechanically, but as soon as you offer such a large space that rewards players for exploration, it's hard to really balance difficulty around that. If you're thorough in exploring, there's basically no challenge. This kind of applied to enemies as well, who are honestly kind of annoying. Not in a difficult way, but in a, ah fuck, the frogs are back, god damn it kind of way. They're not all bad. I like the knife children. Bosses are neat. And the doctors are spooky. Anyone else ever think that with the way the PS1 handles rendering its character models, that all the doctors look like they're wearing paper bags over their heads? That interpretation by itself is one of the things that just makes Silent Hill so cool. What's scarier, a normal doctor chasing you down a dark hallway, or Dr. Emio doing it? That's even scarier. That's fucking terrifying! I also like how it's pretty easy to presume at first that the enemies seem random and disconnected, up until the reveal that these were mostly things Alessa saw around her, or had an interest in reading about. It's a strong way to tie everything together at the end, given the rules of how the town works. I still hate the pterodactyls, but neat. I think it was a good touch to focus less on the raw mechanics and more on the atmosphere, as it makes the early Silent Hill games pretty good gateway survival horror titles for those who find themselves overwhelmed with more demanding games out there. Before this, I could have never even dreamed about finishing any of the Resident Evil games. Those stressed the hell out of me. But after Silent Hill, I was able to play basically all of them. Silent Hill is more about the idea that something could hurt you, with your imagination driving your fears to just be worried about going almost anywhere. The low barrier to entry with the way it handles difficulty and tremendous graphical feats have me curious on why there's even a worry that Silent Hill 1 has aged poorly at all. I know we all have different tolerances for old games, but I'd go so far to say that Silent Hill 1 is probably one of the best aged games on the PS1. Progress is largely intuitive, the controls are solid, and the music goes
Silent
It's wild that they were able to shoot for such an ambitious game and release something that visually still holds up to this day. I don't think I'd ever mind a remake existing, but the original exists in such a unique spot in time where it'd be tricky. In my mind, Silent Hill relies so much on its 32-bit graphics for its aesthetic that I don't think we'd be able to see a modern interpretation pull off exactly what it did. There's a lot of magic in how the pixels obfuscate what you're seeing and interpreting. Never say never though, maybe someone could pull off a good remake. I'd love to see an attempt at least. Having said that, I should probably give Shattered Memories a try, it seems cool. In the meantime, if you haven't played Silent Hill 1 and want to, why wait? There's no time like the present, and the original version is really good. Duck Station is so easy, slap that baby in and get gaming. Before I ever played it, a lot of people told me that Silent Hill had bad voice acting, and it had me assuming the worst before I ever even started. Guess what? The voice acting's pretty good. Some bits are awkward, but for a 90s game, everyone sounds believable with a good hint of uncanny, which is what you want in a horror game. Granted, I wouldn't have said no if everyone was a well-trained master of their craft, so it's something I'm fond of because it ends up coming together pretty well for what it is.
Everybody followed some kind of queer religion.
Even with some awkward performances, character dynamics come across pretty well. Dahlia speaks in double meaning, clearly having some kind of plan she never really wants to let you aware of. Lisa feels lost, with a scattered memory made clear by an optional videotape you can find.
Are you taping again?
Kaufman also is well defined as a suspicious man clearly in over his head, and his optional scenes are pretty solid in showing that there's some serious shit going on in the background. Everyone is utilized well by the narrative, and clearly playing things close to the chest. Them not giving Humbert the full story makes it seem as if each of them has something to hide. Which they super do! With the source of the horror being a cult in this game, you feel in over your head as all these key players talk over you and even get you to unwillingly do their bidding. I wouldn't say I'm head over heels in love with Silent Hill 1's story, since I'm much more into how the games that follow play into how horror can double as introspective character studies. Not to say there's none of that going on here, but there's definitely more of a focus of that in later games. But this is still an engaging and well-made game story, and the mystery has a real pull to it. You never feel like you get all the answers, which makes your first playthrough leave quite an impact on you. Humbert doesn't even really seem to care since he's just focused on getting his daughter, which works for a story trying to deliberately be obscure. And not to mention, the dialogue scenes feel right out of Twin Peaks at points, especially when they play this song.
I don't know what happened.
Oh,
I'd like to find out myself.
this is definitely me when I listen to the Silent Hill OST. While you might not catch a lot of the SH1 tracks pop up in a Silent Chill playlist, this is probably some of the most raw music from series composer Akira Yamaoka. You ever listen to a musician's discography and find the exact moment when they came into their own as an artist? Some people more familiar with his earlier works might disagree, that's fine, but in my opinion, that game is Silent Hill 1. I don't even think it's my favorite OST of the series, but it does a wonderful job contributing to the truly uncomfortable tone permeating this entire experience, and he'll only continue to experiment further in the years to come. This was a time where there were no codified standards for basically anything in a video game, but even for such an experimental time, these tunes really feel out there. It's a violent score, viscerally so, and incredibly experimental. There's something to be said about how a lot of these tracks don't even necessarily feel like music, but instead come across as uncomfortable ambience you'd hear in an abandoned building. Outside of the cutscene songs, there's not much you could listen to for a fun or relaxing time. This isn't oddly soothing and melancholic. This is stresscore, the silent panic attack mix. When listened to separately from the game itself, it feels like it still does a great job telling you about Alessa's story and the justifiable emotion she was feeling about her situation. all the mood swings and everything. The second playthrough had me critical in spots I wasn't expecting to be, like with the pacing. There's a pretty steady flow in the story up until you're done with the hospital, but everything after feels like you're kind of strapped into a rocket and shot directly towards the endgame. I don't mind too much since I'm glad we're rocking with a concise little gem, but I remember there being a bit more meat on its bones. In my distant dreams. I always thought the shopping mall was a full level, but it's really just a room and a boss. It's a really good room, mind you. These TVs make it the best in the game, but a big room all the same. I'll give it to Silent Hill though, there's a lot of variety in locations you visit, even if we don't get to linger in spots as much as I'd like. Critical as I may be though, and I'm not even that critical, I could never find it in me to hate Nowhere. Going back to Silent Hill moments, when you save your game at the final dungeon only to see this now pop up on your save file, genre defining, medium shattering, fourth wall tickling. This is the ultimate Silent Hill moment. You might have noticed I haven't talked much about the story, and honestly, I probably won't. It's pretty good, but all of the things that I've mentioned around the story that uplifts it is the stuff that I really find value in. So that's kinda why I spent so much time talking about that instead. I will say, the finale is a satisfying payoff for all the things they build up, but there's that little something missing for it to really stick with me like the sequels did. Is that a weird opinion? Can I voice these thoughts without people thinking I hate this game? Silent Hill 1 works so much better as an entity without explicit answers. A mysterious and unknowable thing that loves keeping you in the dark. This was the first time I've ever done a playthrough of this game with the full context of what followed, and it's been interesting to say the least. I'm more critical of Silent Hill 1 now, but I have a lot of admiration for it. But let's just cut to the chase. What was the point of all this? Well, I wanted to see if there really was anything left to say about one of the most discussed video game topics on this platform. To be real, I don't even know if I've found much new to talk about either, but even if the things I've discovered on this replay are things you might have heard said by others, I'm still glad I decided to get off my ass and get these thoughts out on paper. It's not like I can be mad that these grounds have been so thoroughly walked on either. It's great that fans love this series so much that they've essentially talked it to death. You see, I encourage art analysis literally no matter what, even if it can sometimes take you down a path to discussing the nitty-gritty of Walter Sullivan's Willy. When I started this project, it was hard not to consider these popular Silent Hill games as more or less solved. I sat there on the credits of Silent Hill, a game I really liked, but was shocked at how little I had to say at first. It's pretty easy to assume there's nothing left to add in a discussion as thoroughly picked apart as this one, given how kind of oversaturated the entire internet feels these days. Overwhelming amounts of noise, people desperate to leave the definitive takes and drown each other out. It can feel so cynical at times. But I've found more than enough people still writing and expressing themselves without a care in the world. I'm envious of that, to say the least. If you're a creative person who gets even half as self-conscious as I do, you're always going to be your worst enemy. Day to day in my adult life, I'll find myself thinking about legacy more than I'd like to admit. I'm always scared that whatever I'm doing won't matter now or even years after I'm gone. You're probably thinking, okay, but what does this have to do with Silent Hill? But do you know what part actually stuck with me the most during this playthrough? That little line from Humbert on why he decided to jot down notes through his adventure. Something that to him might have been a futile effort built on many assumptions and logical leaps, that he did all the same. We never get to see those notes in detail, but someone who's going through hell taking the time to leave a little record to reassure someone in the future going through something similar that they're not alone. And I think that's honestly motivation enough. If nothing else, even if you're sure no one's paying attention to you now, you should try to make your art for the people who come next, because it's bound to find someone, and it might just change their life.
Usually I'd be, you know, at a new fancy place, but I've been editing all night, so allow me this little tiny bit of laziness, please. In terms of who to thank for this video, it's really just Hot Cider for the thumbnail, Supreme Zerker for editing help, and special thanks to Jester and GC Vasquez. And of course, the wonderful people who support me on Patreon. If you'd like to get videos early, see behind the scenes content, and even get your name in the credits, then check out the Patreon to learn more. This month's Metal Royal Slimes are Inoravan, Happy Emmons, Hornkerling, I Frozen Ace, Jeremy DeForest, Moon Watcher, Renteca Bond, Snigs, and your friend Chuck. So yeah, before we go, thank you for waiting on this one. I don't want videos to take so long to make, but you know, that's life sometimes. The next video should be East related, but you know, we'll see what happens. You know how these outros usually go. I am very hungry now, so I'm gonna go make myself some spaghetti. Bye.